Since Billionaires for Equity was posted on YouTube on May 24th to May 27th of 2022, it has generated over 500 views and earned 93% likes versus dislikes. It reflected the unwanted attention of Desegregate Connecticut, one of several beneficiaries of Billionaires for Equity exposed by the video. Desegregate Connecticut urged their Ridgefield disciples to come out and support the plan in mass and to urge Ridgefield to set a 10% goal for low-income restricted housing. We now know how thin their support is in Ridgefield, and to some degree who those supporters represent. Against a backdrop of scores of loyal Ridgefielders came a small but vocal band of Confederates, like Alex Harris, the Democratic Town Committee's past chair and the chair of Ridgefield Allies, Karina Borgia-Drake, the DTC's current chair, Angela Liptak, the DTC's vice chair, and a very visible DTC campaigner, Jessica Mancini. But many more who put Ridgefield above woke ideology, party politics, and Hartford's tyrannical overreach came out and many spoke. This is an excerpted summary of that hearing. If you wish to watch the entire 2-hour hearing, a link to the town videos resource is in this description below. Kim Healy, a selectman from Wilton, reported Wilton adopted the West Cog Annex approach with zero public pushback.
But we did take the West Cog suggestions.
Yeah, there were 8 communities in the West Cog region.
So we felt that they were very comprehensive, and I will say we didn't get any feedback from the town after we approved our plan. So it does concern me that there's so many opinions in the room, and
I look at that as good.
If pushback and public discord was Mr. Marconi's objective, he got it and then some. So why is Ridgefield, unlike many other towns and unlike Wilton, up in arms over this plan? David Goldenberg has made himself a lightning rod by his very public and contradictory public statements, as exposed here by Robin Caruso at a previous affordable housing public information session.
That as the affordable housing chairman, you support this legislation. You support Desegregate Connecticut. This was something from last year. Ridgefield, like most of Fairfield County's bedroom suburbs, is mostly white and affluent. Characteristics my wife and I didn't dwell on when we moved in 1991. We were drawn by the good schools, charming downtown, and a home with a stunning view. It's the kind of town you can fall in love with easily. Segregation was designed into the suburbs through an ugly history of economic discrimination and exclusionary land use policies. And it will take equal intentionality to remedy it. The advocacy organization Desegregate Connecticut understands this, and it's why they're shrewdly focused on land use policy. Their modest proposals contained in SB 1024 would require some towns to allow certain types of multifamily housing where it currently is not allowed. I now believe the only way communities like Ridgefield will enact the need changes is if they have to. And that's why I enthusiastically support Senate Bill 1024 and hope the provisions excluded by the committee will be reinstated. I don't think you were very forthcoming.
No.
And I don't think you were transparent.
This is
And Dave, with all due respect, I request that you step down
Exactly.
from the committee and resign.
Which conflicts directly with his statements that the plan is to take back control and do it Ridgefield's way.
The question is not whether Ridgefield should change, but how it should change. How do we manage the change? And there are 2 options. One is we could ask the state to create mandates and requirements, more requirements like 8-30G. I'll be more than happy to do that. Or we can do it our way.
These are 2 incompatible ideas, an oxymoron, and source of acute cognitive dissonance. And his advocacy of encroaching on open space and habitats that many in Ridgefield believe are sacred trust.
We talked about more assisted housing, and that would be looking at things like Ballard Green, Prospect Ridge, and Halpin Lane for opportunities there, which we've been doing.
This plan is indifferent to conservation. So many people, for the third and in some cases fourth time, subjected themselves to Mr. Goldenberg's filibuster with a recitation of Ridgefield's history from the 18th and 19th centuries. How shameful it is for Ridgefield to be so rich, but not for everybody.
Perceptions of Ridgefield, we're from Ridgefield. Oh yeah, it's a rich town. The median income is $164,000. It's the safest town in Connecticut. Number 6 in the USA. Our schools are tops, rated A+. We have the state's first cultural district. And then there's our wonderful Main Street. What a great place to live. But the reality is not that for everybody.
Mr. Goldenberg tries to make the case that housing affordability is a barrier to hiring based on a sample of 87 businesses in Boston.
Housing for employees is another question. We don't have data on specific Ridgefield needs, but in a study conducted in Massachusetts areas similar to ours, they find that on a scale of 1 to 5, employees unable to find housing at adequate cost is a barrier for hiring.
The Housing Authority waiting list information as presented grossly exaggerates local low-income housing need, as you will learn later.
Another way to gauge need is looking at the waiting list for public housing. In Ridgefield, Ballard Green has 73 people waiting for one of 64 units. In the Meadows, which are the ones on Prospect Ridge, the large buildings in the front, there are 18 on the waiting list for one of 20 units. Congregate, which is part of the Prospect complex that is for generally older people who need some assistance, there are 14 people waiting for one of 34 units. The reason that it's a shorter list is because it's higher churn there as people move on to places where they can receive a higher standard of care. And in our general affordable housing, there's 18 waiting for one of 34 units. The waiting time, I talked to the chairman of the Housing Authority. He said it's hard to say, but it is years. It's multiple years to get into affordable housing in Ridgefield.
He explains A30G even though he claims to not support it, and it is another excuse for inflating low-income housing that exceeds local need.
8-30G sets another threshold of need. If the town has less than 10% deed-restricted or affordable units, then the developer can circumvent local zoning.
He recites external studies from well-funded developer, lobbyists, and activists disguised as nonprofits when he knows they are unrealistic. Why?
There are other studies that have been done. CHAPA says we need 2,260. OCA says 1,241. RPA says 1,554. Westcog says 1,335. We say it's not going to happen.
Finally, Mr. Marconi gets out the hook.
What if we make,
2 minutes.
2 minutes left?
Yeah.
At last, citizens step up to express serious concerns, starting with John Tartaglia.
You permitted members of a committee to draft a report that is not only critical of the town, is a litigation trap. Litigation trap guaranteed. Not only is it a litigation trap, it uses language that is very controversial. For instance, the complete community and compassion theories. These are not theories of government because they are very subjective. They allow for groups, individuals with agendas, to manipulate a general principle in a way that makes a smaller group control a larger group to the detriment of all our profit.
He calls out the biased sources and salacious underlying premise of the plan.
You haven't had the opportunity to have information presented to you neutral. What you've had For instance, the studies or the statistics reported in this draft report they're not, in my opinion, peer-reviewed. I don't see them as peer-reviewed. I see them coming from lobbyist or advocacy groups on a particular wing in the world of the baseball field, left field, right field, middle field, at a particular wing, and it's skewing your perspective and your ability to evaluate fairly. And if you do these things, you're going to cheat yourselves, cheat the town. You will not achieve the purpose of wealth transfer, which is really what's behind all this advocacy. And you're not going to achieve,
Can you please not applaud? This is a public hearing, it's not a show.
It's not a
on
show, we're not
TV.
doing it as a show,
No
I'm doing it
applause.
for a
We want to make
purpose.
comments, that's fine, when you're recognized, but let's move this along,
I'm
Mr.
done.
Tataglio.
The only member of the Housing Authority Board to appear is John Burke, the resident representative to the Housing Authority Board. He provides some clarification, but does not express any support from the Housing Authority for this plan or any desire to see Ballard Green expanded or to develop and operate the proposed Prospect Ridge expansion.
John Burke, I'm at 25 Gilbert here in Ridgefield. I just want to comment on a couple of things. Part of the RHA, you say they have 152 units. I might add to that only 64 units are subsidized. In other words, 64 units get what you call the 30% rule. So if somebody makes $1,000 a month in Social Security, they're only paying $300 a month in rent, and then the state is making up the difference to where the fair market price is. So that is only 64 units. The rest of the units, 88, are what they call general affordable. And by general affordable, I mean that's usually the 50% of the AMI, which is average mean income of the area, or 60%. So if you look at the Meadows, which I think is a nice little area, Prospect Ridge, those people are income restricted. So you've got to get the report completely straight concerning the Ridgefield housing. And so, you know, you talk about subsidy, it's really only 64. The others are in the general affordable, which could come under the affordable housing. And the other thing I want to mention is, you mentioned about building over there by Ballard Green. That is property that is not owned by the city. So to get approval for that, you have to get the owner of that property to approve that.
That is correct. The town does not own the property of 25 Gilbert Street. That's owned by the Ridgefield Housing Authority.
Barbara Grimley asks about private interviews that were not conducted publicly. With almost any other commission or committee, this would constitute ex parte communication, rendering any decision that relies on it null and void.
My
But
point,
this-
Rudy, is though
Sure.
David mentioned he reached out to 30-plus stakeholders.
Okay.
Who were those stakeholders in
All
your
right, Barbara,
presentation?
thank you. You want to respond?
They were leaders of town organizations, private and public, who you would consider stakeholders in the future of the town, everything from ECPC to, Economic and Community Development Commission, to seniors, to realtors, social services. It was a broad spectrum. We also conducted an online survey and had about 900 responses from about 900 households, and that was open to the entire public. And to Rudy's point, any individual project that came out of this plan would of course be subject to all studies and regulations about that specific project. But there's nothing in this plan that's binding, so there's no need to go beyond that for the plan.
Robin Caruso connects the dots between the plan and Desegregate Connecticut, to which Mr. Goldenberg appears to be one of only a handful of enthusiastic disciples in the room.
Robin Caruso, Conley Court. What's being presented is not affordable housing plan, but a plan to change Ridgefield. Like the Desegregate Connecticut plan, this plan calls for zoning and infrastructure change. Most of our neighboring towns, well, many of our neighboring towns, excuse me, have adopted and annexed a regional plan created by the Western Connecticut Council of Governments. Our very own Rudy Marconi is the president and has asked.
Chair.
Oh, sorry, Chair. And has asked Mr. Goldenberg to use the plan. Mr. Goldenberg said no. He's also been asked over and over again by residents to use the plan. He continues to refuse. Why? What is the resistance to the Westcott plan? Well, it could be because Mr. Goldenberg is a supporter of Desegregate Connecticut. Desegregate Connecticut rejected the Westcott plan and instructed their followers to do the same. Mr. Goldenberg has made no secret of his enthusiastic support of legislation that will remove local control of zoning, among other things. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but if anyone wants to know more about it, I'm happy to share. Just a year ago, so Mr. Goldenberg wrote the editorial a year ago. As he was working on this plan, he was opining about Ridgefield's racist and exclusionary zoning and how we should be required to create housing. In fact, the first draft of his plan contained so many references to exclusionary racist zoning that he was asked by the BOS to remove this offensive accusatory language. I watched the video. This plan includes a broad range of data. Some of it is outdated and irrelevant. There was one study from 2008 and another from Boston, which you referenced in your opening. The interviews for this plan were done 3 years ago. His data shows 22% of Ridgefield households are struggling. Well, no surprise there. Connecticut has some of the highest cost of living in the US, from taxes to the cost of doing business to the cost of living and everything in between. Bad policy has made it difficult for most of us to live, work, or own a business in the state. The 22% of households he refers to won't even come close to qualifying for the affordable housing in this plan. Because the numbers they use are the median household incomes of not Ridgefield, but of the Danbury area. So that's 66% of our median income. Talk about seniors. Seniors, many are downsizing and wish to stay in Ridgefield. The affordable housing presented here cannot be set aside for them. Information received from a FOIA request showed just 18% of seniors on the waiting list for housing were from Ridgefield. The waiting lists themselves are also outdated. As for workforce housing, while I agree that teachers, policemen, and firemen should be able to live in town with their families, they are not the workforce that will qualify for affordable housing. The median income, again, being used is from Danbury. While I understand it's been difficult for some employers, it's not up to the town to provide housing for their employees. We are fortunate to have so many affordable, accessible areas so close to our town. 830G is a completely separate and will continue regardless of what happens here. Whether we accept the plan or not, 830G will continue. Mr. Goldenberg likes to wave the moratorium carrot under our noses, but the truth is, there may be no more moratoriums. In his plan, he says if we do nothing, we will see 17 deed-restricted units in 5 years. This means there will be about 55 more housing units based on the 30% affordability requirement. While all 55 won't be affordable, they will address a need and will be considered affordable to many, seniors for instance. But he says if we make zoning and infrastructure changes, we could see 15 to 20. Why would we want to make zoning and infrastructure changes to get 2 or 3 more units, when we could just let things be and let 830G do its thing? 830G has been on the books for 30 years. Mr. Goldenberg has been on the Affordable Housing Committee for almost as long. And now he wants to change our zoning to address the housing crisis as prescribed by Desegregate Connecticut. Well, he's had more than 25 years, and as he himself admits, he has failed. We can address affordable housing without destroying our town. Affordable housing should be built within the parameters and confines of our zoning laws. There should be no infrastructure change to accommodate multifamily housing. There should be no as-of right to build multifamily structures within single-family zone neighborhoods. There should be no repurposing of large single-family homes in single-family neighborhoods. We need a creative approach that will maintain the charm and integrity of our town. If we were allowed to include naturally occurring affordable housing, we would be above the 10% affordability threshold thrust on us by 830G. Why is this fact not highlighted in the plan? As for the affordable housing plan, it will ultimately be included under our town's plan for conservation and development, which was painstakingly developed by the P&Z. There is no mention of conservation in this plan. and it in fact proposes development that will destroy even more wetlands, green space, and open space. Mr. Goldenberg was asked by the P&Z to remove all development and building-specific proposals. The Affordable Housing Committee is advisory only, making this plan the responsibility of you, Mr. Marconi, and the Board of Selectmen, as well as the P&Z. This will become your plan. Please protect our town, our green space, and our open space. Say no to this plan.
The absence of conservation is emphasized by Greg Kabasakalian and is punctuated by a call to employ a proper democratic process under Robert's Rules of Order.
My name is Greg Kabasakalian, 2 Washington. I have 2 problems with the draft plan. The tactical nature of this plan started to bother me, and I said, why? Because it's clearly articulated that we're using property over on Prospect Ridge. Now, I won't get into whether we own it or we don't own it or whatever, but I started to think about why does it bother me that that particular property has been identified. It bothers me because I have my ducks unlimited bid on tonight. They're a conservation group. Just for those of you who don't know, they preserve wetlands. In this town, we strive, according to our POCD, to get 30% open space. That is open space, that property. Now imagine if you were the owner of that property and you bequeathed that property to the town and said, I want to leave this in perpetuity to the town as open space for recreation, and I looked down from heaven and I said, oh wow, look at that, Mr. Goldenberg built the building on my property. I have a big problem with that. Because that brings me to the second problem that I have with this plan. We're operating under Robert's Rules of Order tonight. When I'm on the Board of Finance, we operate under Robert's Rules of Order. Mr. Goldenberg, you operated under Robert's Rules of Order tonight. I saw a motion made, I saw it seconded, I saw a discussion ensue, and then a vote was taken. But that did not happen with this draft. And I thought to myself, why does that bother me? Why? Well, what if Madison said to Jefferson, we happen to have it right here, Madison says to Jefferson, did you talk to Payne? No, I didn't talk to Payne, did you? No, but I know what he wants, I know what he meant. Let's go with it. Next time, vote on it. Then we'll all know. I saw a unanimous vote tonight. That made me feel great. I recommend you doing that when you come up with your updates. Thank you. That's it.
Christina Gudvanta points to the bigger picture of affordability that low-income restricted housing won't touch and how hard families have to work to get here. These families would not be helped in any way by low-income restricted housing.
Christina Gudvanta, 52 Nothill Road, Branchville. I moved here 3 years ago. I escaped, like many people, New York City, which is where I was born and raised. I could have been anywhere. We looked at many different towns, and we chose Ridgefield for 2 reasons: the schools and the open space. If I wanted no open space or limited open space, congestion like I'm seeing on Main Street, I would have stayed in Queens. I wouldn't have chosen Ridgefield. I don't want New York City or Ridgefield to become New York City. That's why I escaped. This is not why. I didn't need to have a 2-hour commute to the city every day, pay $25,000 to $30,000 in taxes to live in Ridgefield. I could have been anywhere else. You know, I'd love to live in Beverly Hills, but nobody will say, here's an affordable housing unit, you want to live here, let's accommodate you. Many of us went to college, worked hard. Not all of us are trust fund babies. Right. And it's the assumption that we are wealthy. I'm a first-generation American. My husband's an immigrant. We worked our butts off to be here. For me, it was a sacrifice to move here. It truly was. And the assumption that people come from certain backgrounds is truly unfair. It's really unfair. If we're asking why people are leaving the state, I don't know if this affordable housing plan will really address everything. People are leaving because of a lack of prospects. Young people don't want to live here. They go to Boston, right, because they have a lot more going on in Boston. But there are reasons why people are moving here. So to your point with the affordable housing, here's my concern. Not just about the character of the town changing, the congestion I'm seeing today, which is why I was late for the meeting, all of that, but really, once they're here and you build the units, how will they afford the groceries and the utilities? I don't think it's really the solution, so I want to look at the whole plan. You get people to stay, but then how do we help them for the town? I go to Caroluzzi's, I can tell you, wow, the groceries have really gone up. Eversource has really gone up. Gas is expensive. So I feel like we have to address all those issues if we really want to be helpful, if we really want to address the reason people have to leave.
I agree with you. I'd love to do something about the cost of oil and gas and everything, but we can discuss our affordable housing plan though. Thank you.
Former DTC Chair Alex Harris and Ridgefield Allies President supports the plan this way.
Alex Harris, 37 Christopher Road. I've been listening to the comments tonight, and I actually want to comment on the plan that I haven't actually heard addressed much tonight. Frankly, I read the plan. I've read it's a draft, and as I understand it, it's a plan that says, okay, we've been charged by the state to look at options for expanding affordable housing. There's nothing in that plan that trades open spaces for affordable housing. There's nothing in that plan that trades environmental sustainability for affordable housing. There's nothing in that plan that trades economic sustainability and fiscal sustainability for this town for affordable housing. Let's not be afraid of that. And certainly let's not be afraid of people who live in affordable housing, because the people who are going to live there, a lot of them already live here, and they want to stay.
That's correct. Thank you, Alex.
Please.
Andrea Beebe repeats the call to use the best parts of the Westcott plan.
Hi, Andrea Beebe, Main Street. I've been to 2 of your info sessions, or the planning and zoning, or the affordable housing info sessions. I've gone to meetings, everything else. And I'm going to ask the same questions that I've been asking every time I've gone. Why is there no Westcott reference in your plan? The last info session I asked, why don't you compare the 2 plans side by side, which would be best practices? Let's see, what are the benefits of your plan, the affordable housing plan, and what are the benefits of the Westcott plan? Put them side by side. See the positives of both, look at the negatives of both, then put together the best plan for Ridgefield. I haven't seen that. I've asked again, I'm going to ask again, and I've asked this in many meetings, has an inventory been taken for what available space is in town? I've asked for that number. I've not heard that number. I've asked and even recommended, or even said, can we look at what is available space on Main Street upstairs in a lot of these buildings that are empty? What incentives can we give to landlords and builders to repurpose them to become apartments that would add to our stock without breaking any new ground? They would already tie into the sewers that are there. They would already tie into the town water that is there. We wouldn't have to be adding to the systems. Which brings me to my last point. We keep talking about Branchville. We keep talking about sewers, that septics maybe aren't the best. We talk about possibly tying into Reading's sewer system. But the last thing I heard 2 weeks ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, Reading hasn't given its blessing yet to have Ridgefield's sewers come into theirs down in Georgetown. So is that a pipe dream, and why are we still talking about it? And I think we're all in this room tonight to develop the best affordable housing plan for Ridgefield. We all worked hard to get here. We've lived here 34 years. We struggled many years. We finally don't have to struggle as much. But there's still times we struggle. But that's part of why we live here, and that the community that I've been part of. So I'm asking, put the 2 plans side by side. Let's look at both of them. Let's choose the best of both and write one plan.
Realtor Jefferson Guthrie urges caution in making plans that pave the way to irreversible overdevelopment.
Jefferson Guthrie, Prospect Ridge. It seems like the plan is not fully vetted. And in terms of changing the zoning, the whole point was to make the town more affordable. So, and I'm just concerned that we really have to think through this, because once that horse is out of the barn, it's hard to take that back. With other things like changing the zoning for first level main apartments. We could sort of start losing our Main Street retail and quaintness about Ridgefield. And also the fact that, we're already changing traffic right now. The next 6 months, we're changing traffic, which I think is good because Main Street, where my office is, I see it all jammed up with traffic. So now we're doing the left-hand turn on Fortuna. We're in the four-way stop by CVS, which is great because already we're having this overflowing traffic. Then if you try to go the back way by Gallo, that lines up very long. So we're happy. So we really got to think through everything about this plan because it seems like we're rushing here and we're not really fully vetting this plan. And also I think just based on the meetings I've been to, there's a lot more questions than answers here. And I think it's being really hammered through without majority of people getting an understanding of the plan, including myself. And also, it seems the stats are being sort of cherry-picked. Some of the stats are really old, some of the stats are newer, and the latest stats that right now, they're an oxymoron. The stats now, I can tell you, 2 years from now, those stats are going to change dramatically. In 2018, you could buy a single family, a one-bedroom condo here for $129,000, $130,000, $140,000. You could buy a rent, you get a rental for $1,200, for $1,300. So, and it took a month sometimes, 6 months to rent them or to sell them. All you have to do is look on days on market on the MLS. And also the other thing is the environmental. Unfortunately, since we've had those condos built by the inn, I know Ridgefield Supplies are open, changed their floor plan around. Casagno never really had a water problem. Well, I just bought a condo in Casagno last year, the basement flooded. And they never had a flooding issue there. And I think we really got to pay attention to the Prospect Ridge and other places with wetlands that, what's going to affect in the places around here. And I think this plan makes a lot of assumptions on changing the zoning, and I don't think everyone fully understands this plan, and especially I'm sort of uncomfortable when the whole committee doesn't approve this plan and we're pushing it forward.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yours truly, Kirk Carr, takes exception to several false premises that underpin this plan.
Kirk Carr, Prospect Ridge, 10%. That's what you have to avoid 830G. It's arbitrary, capricious. It has really nothing to do with need. The only thing it does compare to is that that's about the percentage of poverty in the state of Connecticut. So I'm not saying that's how they arrived at this 10%, but it certainly seems like it. And the question is, why would you want to put, and by the way, the term affordable housing, that's a euphemism. The real word is low income restricted. You can't get into this, quote, affordable housing if your income is over a certain number. Now, Ridgefield, 2%, that's our poverty rate. 3%, that's the percentage of our households that are low income restricted. We're one of 70 towns in the state of Connecticut where they have a higher percentage of low income restricted housing than they have poverty. So the state wants to take that poverty and spread it around to all the towns equally. It's not about housing. Don't kid yourself. This is about spreading around poverty. Ridgefield is a high rent town. We shouldn't be embarrassed about that. There's no shame in being successful. There's no shame in having low poverty.
All right, hold on. This is not a...
There's no guilt. There's no guilt.
Mr. Tartaglia, please.
Now, we've got information about how difficult it is to hire people in Ridgefield based on a sample of 87 businesses in Boston. Give me a break. This is the commutation pattern for Ridgefield. About 80% of our local workers, people who work in Ridgefield, come from other towns. This is Fairfield County. That's the norm for Fairfield County towns. You can't see this from where you are. Compared to the other towns in Fairfield County, that is not, we're in no crisis. You want to talk about a crisis. There's no crisis. The fact is that the population of Connecticut's been going down, and the housing has been going up. I don't know how you get a crisis
out of those numbers. Now, in October of 2020, the Board of Selectmen were sold on applied for a grant of $50,000, and they were told that the Housing Authority had 617 people on the waiting list. Fast forward to April this year, and it was down to 123, 75% decrease in that period of time. But what he didn't tell you also was how many duplicates there were on this list. An FOIA in January showed that there were 29 names on the list that were on 2 lists, and there were 6 that were on 3 lists. It netted out to 81 names on this list. And of those names, 16, 1 out of 5, was from Ridgefield. Now I'm not saying, and Mr. Goldenberg, I hate to use your name, but he would say, well, yeah, but all those other people have relatives or they work here or something. He has no data to support that. Completely speculative on his part. It may be true, I'm not denying it. I just don't know that he can support it. And I'm not saying that people who don't live here don't deserve to live here, don't deserve to move here. I'm just saying that the need has been grossly exaggerated in all of this. My final point is, this is the last page of this plan. It's a summary and action plan. What do you see on it? Nothing. This is nothing. There's nothing on this plan. This is the blank check that the Affordable Housing Committee, the Low Income Restricted Housing Committee, wants you to approve. It's a blank check. It is a blank check. Now, on one hand, I think he's been too specific in different locations. In this case, he's not telling you what the action plan really is. And he will say, well, that's going to come later. And that's a little bit like the health care plan that once it's approved, we're going to tell you what's in it. So I don't think that you can approve this plan as it's been submitted to you. Tony Pirelli recommends a do-over.
I'm Tony Pirelli, 148 Barlow Mountain Road. I would just like to submit to the Board of Selectmen that because the plan is very incomplete and because it's missing a ton of information that people have brought up, maybe you recommission the committee again and give them a much more specific set of guidelines. This is what I want to see, and have it be more objective in terms of what is the best for Ridgefield.
All right, thank you for the suggestion. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Christine Moore is troubled by Mr. Goldenberg's contradictory public statements and calls on the Board of Selectmen to use an annex to the West Cog plan as a better alternative.
Hi there, my name is Christine Moore, and I live at Scott Ridge Road in town. And I want to thank you all for your hard work. Thank the committee, thank Mr. Goldenberg, thank you, Mr. Marconi, for holding this public hearing. You know, based on, I have to say that the opinion piece that you wrote a year ago, it sticks in my mind. I'm not going to read it, but you know, when you go into a plan with the idea that our land use laws are discriminatory, the vision itself is going to be seen through that lens. The plan itself is going to be seen through that lens. And, you know, I don't know that that's really true. I mean, that's your opinion about the land use laws. I'd like to propose that we present the West Cog plan to the state of Connecticut with an annex for Ridgefield, just as many of our neighboring towns have done. This annex should prioritize the detailed inventory and possible use of all existing structures in Ridgefield first. I think that's the best way that we can keep Ridgefield, preserve this beautiful town, you know? It seems like there's a plan for Prospect Ridge, and I don't know how much of an input of the town that you got before you made that, you know, before you added that in your plan. And it sounds, I'm just hearing tonight that the P&Z asked you to remove it. So, you know, hopefully that, and I understand you haven't made the changes yet, so hopefully that will be removed. But again, I believe this is using the West Cog plan with the annex is the best way to assure the plan is more representative of our beautiful town and the voices of its taxpayers. Mr. Marconi, you're the chair of the council of the West Cog, and I would hope that as Board of Selectmen, you would support such a recommendation, so thank you.
Newcomer Lori Luciano worries about the impact on schools.
Hi.
Hi.
Lori Luciano, Lindsay Road. I am also new to Ridgefield. I moved here for the space. I come from Queens and the Bronx, if you can't hear my accent. I was a former teacher, and I'm here to speak for the children. And I used to teach in New York, and the student-teacher ratio is incredibly overwhelming. And I know most of us here are probably parents or grandparents, and I have to say that if we bring in a lot of families into a already taxed classroom, it's just, I want to know, is there any kind of provisions, is there any ideas of like expanding the schools? I mean, I used to teach in a trailer in the Bronx, okay, because there was not enough space. Are we affording children to get another school? Like, what are the plans for the kids? Because they're not represented here. And the traffic, I mean, everybody loves traffic, right? So I don't understand. We're going to overwhelm the schools with no plan. We're going to overwhelm the streets with no plan. I left New York for space and not to sit in traffic. And I don't understand that I'm paying all this money to live in this great town that we researched and saved our money to come here to give our kids a better life for the open air, less pollution. Like, where are the plans? I don't understand.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, I'm new, so I don't know.
Welcome to town.
Thank you.
On the schools, there are no plans, believe me. We just, this year, next year actually, will pay off the last of an expansion that was done a little over 20 years ago. And our enrollment now is down from a high of 5,600 students to about 4,500. So we're down about 1,100 students across the district due to many factors. 9/11 hit right in the middle of when we had already voted. The recession hit, many factors involving enrollment, but there are no plans, believe me, to increase or spend additional funds to expand our school system. We have a lot of room available. In terms of traffic, we are looking at that every day. Having grown up here, I know what you're talking about when you compare what it was to what it is today. There's no doubt the town has changed. And the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, we all want to hang on to the Ridgefield we know and has been here for so many years, and to maintain the character and protect that. And we're all on the same page there. So we're with you. We have the same thoughts in our minds as well as elected officials. Thank you.
John Tartaglia explains how the ideology behind his plan works against the best interests of Ridgefield, and how Ridgefield's network of philanthropies provide a non-government safety net.
John, go ahead.
I analyze the problem here as a plan that it's good to engage in dialogue, but by limiting the perspective, it skews the dialogue. So the plan is no good. The plan is a preamble. It takes 10 or 20 pages to talk about a theology, an approach, talking about complete communities. I'm not sure everybody here understands the use of those terms, open communities. The use of those words are trigger words for things that nobody wants. You can't keep cutting up downtown or other, I know you're gonna dump on Route 7, so I know my end of town is gonna get the hit here. That's why I'm really passionate, because that's the end of town that's got a sewer, and that's the end of town that nobody cares about. As long as you keep downtown good, it comes my way, which doesn't make me happy, and it doesn't help the town. It doesn't help Branchville either, quite frankly. So the answer is, you can't let this debate get out of hand of a simple, specific. We have churches here. Anybody who's in trouble in this town, we have a system of community that helps. There's nobody here that couldn't go to Jesse Lee. I can't even say the good things about every church, every charitable organization in this town. There's nobody that doesn't get help here. But if you want to do what they want to do, they want to do something different. They don't want to help us. They want to help an idea, an ideology that is not necessary for our task at hand. In Connecticut, there are 200 cities or towns. the state is unique, and it's in its constitution. It has home rule. Where this 830G has gone, it's created some legal reasons why they want to try and force a zoning board. They create assumptions against general decisions that are bad for the town.
Democrat campaigner and activist Jessica Mancini is the second of 4 Confederates who support the plan and dismiss the concerns of Ridgefielders that they are raising, and tells us her children, and presumably ours, are privileged and will benefit from exposure to greater diversity.
Hi, 53 Woodlawn Drive, Jessica Mancini. I just want to make sure that you guys understand that he does not speak for me. He does not speak for a lot of my friends. I 100% believe in bringing in diversity to our town, however we need to do it. I have 3 sons, 19, 15, and 8, and I strongly believe that one of the things that they have been lacking in this town is diversity. Whether that's religious diversity, whether that's income diversity, they are lacking. And quite frankly, I speak to them all the time. There's a lot of peanut gallery going on back here. I speak to them all the time about their privilege. You know, my middle son goes to Worcester School, okay? And they, Worcester Private School. And I just want you to hear this.
Can I call a timeout, please, in the back of the room, please? If you want to talk, please, there's the foyer right out here, hallway. Thank you. Go ahead.
And they pride themselves on their variable tuition and the people on bringing diversity into their community, because they understand the value added to their community when you do that. So, you know, this whole agenda thing or what people are saying, I'm completely confused by, because we should be embracing that. That's an amazing thing. The other thing I want to say is, it seems to me, and I am coming in this a little bit later, it seems to me that the process has been followed appropriately, or at least how we would normally do things. The committee has been appointed by the Board of Selectmen. The committee has created a plan. Does not need to be a consensus on the plan. P&Z has weighed in, and you guys are going to look at the plan and decide. It's a representative democracy. We elected you. That's what the work you guys are going to do with the plan. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand that there are other people, and I am going to dive into the plan, but the things that have been said tonight, I don't agree with. And my family has lived here their whole entire life. My children are 5th generation. So that's what I have to say.
Tracy O'Connor takes exception to Ms. Mancini's assertion that everything is being done properly, and gets Mr. Goldenberg to acknowledge that no committee vote was ever made on this plan. Mr. Marconi shamefully defends this violation of Robert's rules.
Tracy O'Connor, Prospect Street. I'd like to answer this lady here and ask David Goldenberg, did you do a vote on this plan? Did every committee member have a vote before you put this plan together? That's a simple yes or no.
We did not have a vote on the plan because we don't have a plan
So you
yet.
didn't follow Robert's rules.
No, you're
Okay,
I'm
that's-
sorry, I think you're
The
incorrect.
draft does not require a vote, but it's okay. Let's just move this forward. We're not here to criticize one another.
Karina Borgia-Drake, current DTC chair, is the third of 4 Confederates who may have been inspired by Desegregate Connecticut's email to its so-called pro-home advocates. She implies that people opposed to the draft are heartless and indifferent to the hard times that can unexpectedly confront Ridgefielders.
Hi, Karina Borgia-Drake, 16 Bayberry Hill. I've been in Ridgefield about 10 years. I moved from Brooklyn, New York, or also not from a family of privilege. I really think that this is a draft. It is not a final, I'm understanding that this is not a final piece. And I just want to thank, because I really know Cheryl a very long time, who was on this committee as well, and very passionate about certain parts of it and what it means to families here and the families I knew as a Board of Ed member, and moms I know when they get divorced here and want to stay here and hit hard times and have a really, really hard time surviving here, but they want their kids to stay in our schools. It's one piece of a puzzle, to your point, sir, in the front. One piece of the puzzle is that people who are here
To the
can
board,
stay here.
please. I don't want to debate.
No, but that people here can stay here even when they hit hard times. And when I worked as a case manager, as a nurse, people don't plan to get cancer. They don't plan to be on one income. They don't plan for these things to happen. And when that happens, and something like this is available, whether it's 30 homes or 100, it makes it so people can stay in this beautiful community. Coming from Brooklyn, New York, because things are mentioned here, there's a lot of, if you're new to town, misinformation going around that is not accurate. Having served on the board, we have class size minimums. There's no way that we're gonna have 30 kids in the classroom as happens in New York. So I would just verify some
Okay,
facts
again,
up
to
there.
the board, please.
I'm with you, Rudy. I just want to say that I support the idea of this draft moving forward.
Thank you.
Elizabeth DeSalvo, a Planning and Zoning Commissioner, tells everyone where they can find the PZC's input.
Hi, Rudy. I'm Elizabeth DeSalvo, White Court on the P&Z. I just want to say that our letter to the AHC is on viewpointcloud.com. It's the 7th document under miscellaneous.
Thank you.
I heard what Ms. Luciano, is that correct? And if this was a Ridgefield plan, it was an affordable housing plan, about 2% of it would be low income restricted. We have seen our enrollment going down 20%, so we have a lot of capacity. And families are not moving here, or they're not having children. And this is a district reference group A that does have controlled class size.
Please.
I'm sorry?
To the plan? Yeah.
Well, I am talking the plan. This plan should not be about attracting families who couldn't qualify for low income restricted. Unfortunately, we've defined affordable as low income restricted, but we need to attract families. And the other one is the aging. The two most important metrics is the reduction in the enrollment and the aging of the population. Those two things are the things that should be addressed. We don't have a low income restricted problem. We don't have a big population of people who can't get housing. Yes, there are situations where somebody has a problem, and to your point, they generally can be taken care of philanthropically until something opens. And I don't mean to diminish that, but an affordable housing plan would not be strictly about low-income restricted housing. Thank you.
Angela Liptak, the fourth of 4 DTC Confederates and the current DTC Vice Chair, repeats an urban legend that newly hired teachers would qualify for low-income restricted housing.
My name is Angela Liptak. I live on Wilton Road East. I just thought I'd provide a data point that speaks to the economic diversity that we may find helpful to have in our town. If you are applying for jobs in the Ridgefield Public School System and you enter as a first-year teacher in the Ridgefield Public School System, the income you will be making is approximately $49,000 a year. And I think, doing the math, that might mean that if you wanted to teach in the same community where you live, it would be very, very challenging here in Ridgefield. Somebody who does the math maybe can help me with that, but I believe it would be very challenging. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Liptak distorts the facts by referring only to the teacher's contract-based salaries. A single teacher earning less than $64,960 would qualify for low-income restricted housing in the greater Danbury area. But remember that income qualification is for the teacher's total income, not just their base salary. These base incomes cover only 9 months of the year. Teachers have 3 additional months of potential earnings that could easily exceed the limit. Teachers that teach 2 months of summer school salaries would gross up to exceed the income limitation for all but the newest and least educated teachers. In addition, teachers can earn $45 an hour writing curriculum and $55 an hour for homebound tutoring, annual equivalents of $86,000 and $105,000 respectively. Add stipends for student activities. There are very few single teachers, if any, who could qualify for low-income housing, and none for more than a few years. The income restriction for a couple is $74,240, so the lowest earning teacher with no other source of income would need to have a partner or a spouse with an annual income of less than $25,427 to qualify. Such circumstances are as rare as hen's teeth. Mr. Marconi adjourns the meeting and slips in that this may not be the last public hearing on this subject.
Thank you all very much. Really appreciate your input. It's not to say we won't have another public hearing. I'm not promising that, but it depends on where the Board of Selectmen goes. We'll be meeting on June 1st. We'll have a work session about this. Thank you for your attendance. Appreciate it. Good night, everyone.
If you're still with us, there is still a lot to briefly unpack. One thing is clear. The Desegregate Connecticut effort to flood Ridgefield's meeting with their disciples was not very effective, and in fact may have backfired, and turned out their detractors in impressive strength. The link between Desegregate Connecticut and the Ridgefield Democratic Town Committee was visibly exposed. Their shared creed is that low-income housing is a panacea for which neighborhoods and open space should be sacrificed, that Ridgefield kids are models of privilege and should be reminded and shamed for it. Ridgefield's exclusionary zoning deserves to be disparaged and punished because it intentionally stands in the way of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is the Kool-Aid this plan concocts, and they want us all to drink it with them and to send this plan to the state as our confession of guilt and plan of penance. Alternatively, Ridgefield could unite behind a plan for Ridgefield, not for Hartford or for Desegregate Connecticut. That plan's proposals would be proportionate to the demographic needs. With 2% poverty, only a small fraction of the plan would be income-restricted housing. It would be objective and affirm Ridgefield's commendable attributes, including its ample, unrestricted, affordable housing, its open space, and its conservation, instead of disparaging its history and its institutions. It would use current and relevant data, not the distorted quotas from developer-funded lobbyists disguised as nonprofits. It would scrupulously adhere to transparency and democratic process embodied in Robert's Rules of Order, respecting and reflecting Ridgefield residents' input. It would escalate Ridgefield values over Hartford's arbitrary and capricious dictates. The plan presented by Ridgefield's Affordable Housing Committee fails in every possible way against these standards, and in response to the public input should be rejected and replaced by the Ridgefield Board of Selectmen with a completely revamped annex to the West Cog Affordable Housing Plan. Ridgefield now has the benefit of experience and can review plans of neighbors to see how they may have averted the pitfalls and flaws that the public response has exposed in Ridgefield's current draft. This video written, narrated, and produced by Kirk Carr. Thank you for watching. Copyright 2022, all rights reserved.